From Relay, this is Upgrade, episode 610. Today's show is brought to you by Delete Me, Squarespace, Steam Clock, and Factor. My name is Myke Hurley, and I am joined, and I'm happy to be joined, by Jason Snell. Hi, Jason Snell.
Hi, Myke Hurley. It's good to be back on a normal episode of Upgrade.
Yeah, I missed doing a dramatic reading. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but I have a Snell Talk question for you it's Ben who says, with Jason's love of space and the Artemis 2 launch, what are some of Jason's favorite space blogs and reporters that people should be following? And I also just wanted to put this in here in case you wanted to just talk briefly about the Artemis 2.
Yeah, sure. Very exciting. They're going to the moon. As we record this, they're going by the moon like today. Today is Moon Day. They're going to fly by the moon and then come back to Earth. I used to do a podcast with Stephen Hackett called Liftoff. Yep. People sending in messages saying, are you going to bring Liftoff back? And it's funny because you witnessed me many times refuse to declare Liftoff retired and say that maybe we would bring it back sometime, and Stephen would check the box in the CMS that said retired, and I'd uncheck it. Yep. And I found a strange thing when this all was happening. I within me, where I thought within myself, and I thought, no, actually, I'm also fine that it is retired. Sorry, everybody who liked it, but I have let it go. We have moved on to other things. However, I do love space stuff. I think it's great, and I think it's inspirational. And I really like seeing a bunch of scientists and stuff in my social feeds who are not doing the thing, which is, we really shouldn't do any crewed exploration of anywhere and only sell robots and just be kind of Debbie Downers about the whole thing. I think that some human exploration is super important because it is inspirational and because it helps us understand more about our universe, and it makes the public understand more about our universe, which I think is important. Like, people are much more interested, I think, in people flying to the moon than they are in a robot digging up things on Mars, even though that's super important and interesting. Yeah. Anyway, the reporters, Eric Berger at Ars Technica, there's a space section on Ars Technica that is the best. The best. So, highly recommend. Eric Berger is the primary reporter there, although they have another one whose name escapes me now. Sorry to that guy. But Eric Berger is the best. He's so good at this. And Lauren Grush, who used to be at The Verge and is now at Bloomberg, is my other favorite space reporter at the moment. Also, the New York Times does a bunch of good space coverage, so that's another place to go. They've got a reporter on the space beat who's pretty good, whose name also escapes me. Sorry to that guy. But it's the New York Times guy. I subscribe to the New York Times space feed in my RSS reader, in fact, and get to see a bunch of their good stories about it. So, and the other Apple-related news, or at least tech-related news, is that they've been sending pictures back, including a really beautiful picture of the entire globe, which was taken with a Nikon camera. Because we've got, they're not shooting on a Hasselblad with film anymore, they did in Apollo 8. So they've got really nice cameras that they're taking that are, the Hasselblad was a nice camera, but it was a film camera. And then they came back and developed the film and went, oh my God, it's Earthrise. It's the most beautiful picture humanity's ever taken. This time they're going to be able to take better pictures even than that. And
they can send them straight back to us too.
Yeah, maybe not straight back. They have to
straight-ish, as in we'd have to wait for them to come home to get it.
Yeah, or they may be able to downlink some of them, but it'll take a while. But I also wanted to mention, though, I think in the Apple notability is that there are iPhones on this mission. It's the first iPhone mission since, I think, the last shuttle launch that I saw. They have all the radios turned off. They're in what I always called on that shuttle mission, I called spaceship mode. They have these iPhone 17 Pro Maxes, and they are shooting photos with them, and the best ones are they actually are using the selfie cam to take these selfies of themselves looking out the window at the disk of Earth, and presumably they'll do this with the moon too. And those are iPhone photos. So the iPhones are also being used. That's why the iPhones are there, is to take photos. Let the crew take photos of themselves and their crewmates and out the window and stuff. But they also do have a fancy Nikon digital camera, so they're not just using iPhone photography to take vital pictures of the moon flyby and stuff like that. They've got a Nikon T5.
Do you think those iPhones are provided by Apple? Do you think Apple worked with NASA at all with these iPhones? Or do you think they're just iPhones?
I saw a story that said that Apple didn't work with NASA on it. I would be surprised if there weren't some unofficial conversation going on, especially since they needed to qualify them for use on a spacecraft. I'm sure Apple would help if they were asked. I'm not sure if they were asked.
Okay. Because you figure pretty good marketing, right?
Right, and I'm told there are two fancy Nikons. To suffice it to say, they're fancy Nikon cameras on, and they're also iPhones taking photos and video and stuff, and that's cool too. And there'll be some amazing shots that will come back. And I predict there will be an amazing shot today because they're going to try to take that Earthrise photo, and that will be amazing because the whole idea of seeing the entirety of the Earth, which contains all of human history, as a little blue dot rising over the horizon of the moon, will be extremely impressive. So, just as it was on Apollo 8. Apollo 8. I was saying this to Steven. Apollo 8 is like all-time underrated space mission because that was the first time they sent people around the moon, and they actually stopped and went into orbit for a while and then came back. And that's where they shot the Earthrise photo, and it was the end of 1968, which the legend is, because that was such a bad year that a lot of people felt like it was a positive note after a terrible year, which was. It's an all-timer of space missions. So anyway, that's my Space Corner, Myke. Since I don't have Liftoff anymore, you get Space Corner.
If you would like to send in a question of your own, please go to upgradefeedback.com and you can send in a Snell Talk question for us to open a future episode of the show. I'd like to do some follow-up, and just first off, thanks to everyone who sent us in very kind feedback about our Origins of Apple episode last week. We're so pleased that people enjoyed it so much.
Mm-hmm. For sure. When you ask for feedback, sometimes you're going to get what you're going to get.
Yep. But we got it, and it was nice. Like, really, really, really good feedback, and I'm very thankful for it, and we loved it. The episode was way bigger than we thought it was going to be, and we moved to move a lot of stuff into today. It was meant to just be like a segment of the episode, but it was just so much fun to do. We just made it the whole show, and we really hope that you enjoyed it. We loved making it.
Yep.
On that note, you published something on Six Colors about some Apple history books that you've been reading, and so I wanted to put this as a link in if people want to catch up on some stuff. And I did want to make a recommendation to you for a book called Icon, which I've read it multiple times many years ago. I don't know how it stands up now, but I know you had spoken about that book that's coming. Is it called In Exile?
Steve Jobs in Exile. Yeah.
Icon focuses on some of that stuff too, and it's a lot of Pixar stuff in that book, which I think is, obviously a really interesting and important part of his story, as well as some next stuff. So it's about his return, basically.
I have it, and I should read it, but I have not read it. And one of the reasons is it's literally the worst title of any Apple book because
it's not
at the moment when it was released, because it's Icon, lowercase I, of course, like iPod, capital C-O-N. And when it was released, it's very clear that the publisher is like, it doesn't mean I con people. I'm a con man. And it's like, that is not the right title for that book.
No.
I'm sorry that you messed it up, and you messed it up. So it's a bad. It's bad.
It's a bad title. Good book.
And some people feel that The Second Coming of Steve Jobs is a better book on the same subject, but I haven't read that either. So I've got it on my list. I as a part of this whole Apple at 50 and doing that episode of Upgrade, and I have been acquiring more of these Apple books that I haven't read. Obviously, because I came up with a list of 10 books, but there are so many. So I've been getting more of them. But anyway, people can check that out on Six Colors, and I've got a Stephen Hackett recommendation in there, and I think a John Siracusa recommendation in there. Or I do. So there's a bunch. There's a bunch of good books about Apple. There are a lot. First off, there are a lot of books about Apple, but there are a smaller number that are good books about Apple.
Yeah. Yeah, but they are out there.
They are.
Unfortunately, one of the ones that should have been the best was one of the worst.
I had somebody ask me on some podcast, I think it was maybe Leo Laporte, said, so you don't have Steve Jobs by Isaacson on your list? I'm like, well, two reasons. One is it's a list about Apple books and not Steve Jobs biographies. And two, people have lots of issues with that book. So, it's got stuff in it because of the access with Steve. I used it in my script for some of the raw material last week, right? Like, because there are things that he told Isaacson that
As quotes, yeah.
There's good quotes and stuff in there, but the problem is that Walter Isaacson doesn't understand computers. I think that's the bottom line. Is he doesn't understand. He's a biographer, but he doesn't understand computers. And if you are a computer person, then you can see all the things that he says that are just like, that's not right. That's not what happened. And he's obviously blind to it because he doesn't care about that. But I think we all found that a little bit troubling, that there were so many things in that book that didn't seem quite right, given his level of access. And that's why I view that book, rightly or wrongly, as a source of material, but not as a definitive resource. It's more the book that you use to say Steve Jobs told Isaacson this, and not the book where you say just read this book. Like Pogue's book, to me, is one of the things that makes Pogue's book so good, is that especially, from the beginning up to the, through the iPhone, again, sort of less after that because of the issues with access and people still working at Apple, but like, it feels to me very definitive. Like you could, if somebody asked me what's a book about Apple history, I'd say just get Pogue's book, because like it is the definitive. The only issue with Pogue's book, I think, other than that, is that it is kind of exhaustive. It's very long. There may be more information about the Apple II than modern readers really care about, but it's in there, and that makes it definitive in a way. Whereas the Isaacson book feels very much like not definitive, but a good source of material given his access, it's not the same.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting comparing the response to the Pogue book and the Isaacson book, right? Where it's like the Isaacson book, as well as getting stuff wrong, it was criticized a lot for just retelling stories everybody knew.
Yeah.
And Pogue is doing that, but he obviously is doing a better job, because that's not a criticism that is being levied at a book, just a practicality of the situation.
I agree. I would also say that, I think Pogue's approach is better, and I think Pogue is also writing a biography of Apple, and I think that's a better approach to those stories than a biography of Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Apple has released some security updates for iOS 18 after previously withholding security updates for iOS 18, pushing people to upgrade to iOS 26. I know we spoke about this a few months ago, and you were understandably quite upset about it.
Yeah.
But now they've gone and done what they should have done.
This is a really quirky story. It happened on April 1st, so it happened last week amid all the 50th hoopla. But the short version of this story is there were some serious security updates that were pushed out that were like back in December. That were like they were for like nation state actors or other groups that are contracted with nation states. It's pretty much where they came from. So it's not a security issue that broad sectors of the public would face. But what happened is, although Apple seems to offer plenty of security updates on other platforms for the people who are like one OS version back, on iOS, and this is not apparently a new policy, on iOS, beyond a very short cutoff, they stop releasing security updates for anything but the latest OS that you can run. And it led to the very frustrating case where there was a bulletin that came out that said this is a serious security issue, and there was an iOS 18 update that supported it, but it only ran on systems not capable of running iOS 26. For iPhones capable of running iOS 26, you needed to update to iOS 26 to get the security update, which I said was kind of ridiculous because it clearly existed for iOS 18, and they were just withholding it because if you're running one of these more modern phones, you should just run iOS 26. There are a lot of reasons people don't want to run iOS 26. I would argue that most of them aren't very good reasons, but let people have their feelings, right? So I've gotten to understand a little bit more about what's going on here. At least that this was not a broad attack. It was more like a very targeted nation state attack. And honestly, if you are the kind of person who is going to be attacked by a nation state, you're going to want to put all those security features on, and you're going to want to be on the latest version of iOS at all times, because
you should use that lockdown mode, right? Is that what it's called, I think?
Yeah, exactly. So 18.7.7, which came out last month, and the latest 26 update, both address these two scary security breaches, Dark Sword and Karuna. Okay? So The difference is there are some in between. One of the features of iOS 26 over iOS 18 is every full OS version that comes out, Apple is looking at the security. The security team looks at the security state of the world and knows what exploits have been out there and is making like systematic adjustments to the way the OS runs in order to fight them. So 26 is fundamentally more secure than 18. And so when I say there was a 26 update and an 18 update that both address Darksword and Karuna, my understanding is the 18.7.7 update is a patch, right? It's patching on a leakier foundation than the 26 update does. Because the 26 update comes with a bunch of other security features that make it fundamentally more secure. And so the message is, if you're one of these people who's really concerned about security, like even if, and we'll get back to the iOS 18.7.7 update in a second, even if you update to 18.7.7 on your iPhone, you are not as secure as you are on the latest 26. You're more secure, but you're not as secure as on the latest, because the latest has a whole fundamental set of security updates that 18 never got, because it was part of the 26 fundamentals, right? It's not you can't backport that stuff. You can patch, but you can't backport that stuff.
Yeah, I got a notification on my iPhone a week or so ago that said, like, your phone has received a security update. And it seemed detached from a software update. And I don't recall ever seeing this notification before. It very specifically called out security updates. And I wonder if this is part of what you're talking about, that they're doing different things.
I mean, so what happened here is 18.7.7 came out last month, but on Wednesday the 1st, Apple pushed out 18.7.7 to all devices running 18. So that's the change. The change is they finally did the thing I was complaining about, which is, if this is a very big security problem, maybe what you should do is push your security updates for iOS 18 to all phones running 18, not just the ones that are not capable of running 26. And the side effect of that I think is super important is that major OS updates need to be manually agreed to by the user. The user is asked, would you like to go to iOS 26? And you can say no. You can say yes by mistake and stuff like that. But like, they don't just silently overnight update you to iOS 26. They don't do that. However, point releases in the same OS release can update automatically. And what it means is all those people who are holding back and saying, I don't want to go to iOS 26, even though I can, are getting a security update that will patch them against Darksword and Karuna, which is important because some of that stuff is like on GitHub where like everybody can see it, which means it's going to be a more broadly felt security exploit than it was when it was sort of limited to just nation states. So it's good that Apple did this. Again, I don't understand this policy. I understand Apple believing that, well, if you can run 26, you should. It's so much more secure than 18, even with patches. I get that. But, like, if you're making 18 available to the people who can't run 26, just make it available. Like, I'm not saying even forever, but, like, maybe for one cycle, just do it, right? Like, just let those people have their patches. I think this is an unusual cycle because people really have gotten it in their heads that they're just refusing to run iOS 26. So be it. I'm glad that Apple finally did this. It's a weird story. So I'm glad they did it. What took them so long? The fact that 18.7.7 came out last month, but it was only on April 1st that they decided to push it out to everybody else. It's like, what? I don't know. But obviously this was, what I said in the story is it was good news and bad news, right? It's good news they did this. Bad news is they had a reason to do this, which is these very bad security breaches. But they did do it. So I don't know. I think Apple cares a lot about their user security, but I think this is one of those areas where certainly it gives the impression that they're withholding security updates in order to drive OS updates. And I know that probably what's really happening is they feel it doesn't make their users more secure to make it easy for them to stay back a version because of all the other stuff you get when you update. But I think that's probably a mistake, and that more communication is probably warranted here about security updates in 26 versus in 18. Anyway, so it's a complicated, weird story. The good news is, and I'll say this now, if you've still been saying no or you've turned off all updates or whatever, if you're using an iPhone that's still on 18, update to 18.7.7. You can. All of you can, no matter what model you're using, and you should. That's it.
So Discord found the thing that I'm talking about is a new thing. It's from 26.1 onwards, called background security improvements.
Oh yeah, these are the quick patches that happen.
So this is that thing that I saw. So this happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Where overnight, I think it was March 17th was the thing. They can, between point updates, can rework. It says components such as Safari, WebKit, and other system libraries that benefit from smaller ongoing security patches. So I got a notification that one of those was done.
I bet those were patches regarding these leaks, right? And that has to do. Yeah. There's the what is it? The Eclectic Light Company blog that is all about paintings and Apple security. Seriously, like paintings. It's art and it's amazing. Anyway,
what is that called? What is that website?
It's Eclectic Light.
The Eclectic Light Company.
Yeah, it's Howard Oakley is his name, and there is a Mac front page now that you can go to if you don't want to see the blog posts about paintings. I love his blog posts about paintings; they're awesome. Anyway, he writes about this a lot, and one of the things, it's a great blog. It's very technical, but he a lot of these security updates are doing things where like they don't need to update the whole OS. They update like these they're like little packages within the OS that can be updated. And it allows Apple to do these kind of like more rapid response. Your Mac has this ability too, where they'll send out like rapid response updates of different kinds. Because Apple, believe it or not, Apple has a big security team that is working hard to fight this stuff. But yeah, I don't love this policy. I think they should just say, we're going to do security updates one OS back, and just do it that way. But they don't for the iPhone for some reason, and I don't love it. But at least they did in this case, because this was a bad enough issue that they flipped that switch.
This episode is brought to you by Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everybody vulnerable. Sadly, it's easier than ever to find personal information about people online, and nobody wants their address, phone number, or family members' information hanging out on the internet. And with Delete Me, you can protect your personal privacy or the privacy of your business from doxing attacks before sensitive information can be exploited. The New York Times Wirecutter has named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Just over the weekend, I got my email update from Delete Me, where they could show me, hey, of the information that you provided us, we've gone ahead and we found all of this stuff online, all of the records of this and all these data brokers. We've removed it from all of these ones. We're in progress of these ones. We're following up on those, because that's the great thing about Delete Me. It's an ongoing service where they're constantly going out there, checking what's changed, removing that information from new places, making sure it stay off the ones that they ask it to stay off. They're really in your corner looking out for you, and I feel like they're protecting me. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up today for Delete Me with a special discount because you listen to the show. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 and use the promo code upgrade20 at checkout. The only way to get that 20% off is at joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 with the code upgrade20 at checkout. One last time, that is joindeleteme.com/upgrade20 with the code upgrade20. Our thanks to Delete Me for their support of this show and Relay. Apple confirmed to the New York Times that its fitness head Jay Blahnik is retiring from the company. Blahnik had previously been accused of creating a toxic work culture. The New York Times reported on this, I think, a couple of years ago. And then after a reshuffle in the fitness org, Blahnik was going to be reporting to Dr. Sumbul Desai. rather than directly to Eddie Q. This seemed, from the outside, to look like a demotion. Things were moved around, and Blahnik was not in that spot who was going to be reporting to the chief of the division anymore. And also there have been these conversations about whether Fitness Plus was being reconsidered. Well, all of that has resulted, my assumption is, in Blahnik taking leave of the company.
Yeah, he's officially retiring. And this feels to me like this is what happens when you have a senior executive who's been there a long time, who's been accused of things that are unacceptable. What happens? They get like a golden parachute, which is super unfair, but this seems to be what happens. So, but he's out is the answer. This guy's out.
Yeah, this was one where Apple, they said, we have no kind of, we've investigated it, can't find any wrongdoing, but who knows, right? Like it seems that maybe something may have gone on here. We can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this, but my read on it from the outside is those statements are basically like, we can't fire him for cause. We are concerned that if we fire him for cause, he's going to take us to court, and it's going to be really ugly. So we've negotiated a settlement where he leaves and we move on. But that happened. That's one of the reasons why these mostly men who have bad behavior of various kinds get paid off to leave, is the company has just decided it's easier than having a lawsuit to just pay them to go away. And is it gross that people who behave badly get paid to go away because of their bad behavior? Yeah, it's real bad. But I will say it's not my money, and that guy is out. And that seems like it's probably a good idea. Like, this is the other way. We've been talking a lot about employee turnover and how it's good to have new people in new positions of authority because they can make changes. Another advantage of employee turnover is when you have people who are toxic and they leave. And having experienced that, oh my God, sometimes it is so freeing to have a toxic person out of your organization. And if you're in the organization, like, you're not the one who paid his severance or his settlement, but you don't have to deal with that guy anymore. And that can be a huge deal.
Writing at 9to5Mac, Zach Hall is reporting that delivery times for the Mac Studio are at least 4 to 5 months away if you do any RAM configurations. If you do not buy like one of the stock configurations, you're looking at a 4 to 5 month lead time. Stephen Hackett followed this up with the same kind of information about the Mac Mini. It seems like laptop delivery times are much better, even if you configure them. So you could assume that Apple is maybe prioritizing where its RAM's going. I did some digging around this morning. I can get an M5 Max MacBook Pro of 128 gigabytes of RAM in 2 weeks. An M4 Pro Mac Mini with 64 gigabytes of RAM will take 16 weeks.
Yeah.
So, this is, I guess, the way that Apple is deciding to deal with the RAM issues.
There's two issues going on here, though, because also I would say those Mac Studio delays are lies, is my guess. This is just my read on it. I think my read on this is we are no longer building the M4 Mac Studio. So we can't make you a custom one.
Right.
Because they're going to do an M5 Mac Studio. And it's going to be out probably less than 4 to 5 months from now.
Yep.
So that's my guess, is that they are stopping or have stopped making the Mac Studio M4 because they're going to make the M5. And they've got the configurations that they've built that they will sell you, but they're not going to build you a custom whatever because, and this is how Apple does that with systems that are not going to ship, is they're like, yeah, you can order a MacBook Air, but now it's out 4 months. And then 2 months later, the new MacBook Air comes out and they're like, oh, guess what? You can have that one now or whatever. Yeah. So I think that's what's going on here. The Mac Mini is a more interesting story, and I think you're right. I think that maybe there is some prioritization going on about where their RAM chips are going right now, and that's to laptops, because they've got all those new laptops that are out there, and the Mac Mini's been out there for a while. Yep. But some of this also is just that the Mac Studio, like that is, we are at the end of the life of the M4 and M3 Ultra, I guess I gotta say, Mac Studio, which, it'll always be the Mac Studio that I wrote about by the pool in Hawaii on my vacation.
They can never take that away from you.
No, they can never. Oh, M3 Ultra. what a baffling thing you are. So that's gonna happen, and so my spider sense says that they're not making the M4 Studio anymore, but the Mac Mini, yeah, it's really interesting. So I guess get a stock model if you really need one. I don't know. Maybe this is also a subtle way of Apple stopping people from buying like RAM loaded up Mac Minis to do OpenClaw and stuff like that.
You know, there definitely was a run on the Mac Mini, right? That like could also be part of this.
Yeah.
Like Apple could not have foreseen how many Mac Minis they were going to sell in certain locations.
I don't know for a fact that they're doing this, but like I could see a scenario where they're literally looking at their spreadsheets and saying our margin on this RAM is much higher in a MacBook Pro than it is in a Mac Mini. We price the RAM the way we did in the Mac Mini because it's a low volume product, and now it's higher volume than we want, and we have a limited supply of RAM, and so let's put it in our products that are most profitable. And that's not the Mac Mini. That is the MacBook Pro. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if this was ultimately a spreadsheet-driven decision to just turn the dial down on Mac Mini production and use those chips somewhere more profitable.
Speaking of discontinuing Macintosh models,
yes,
a couple of weeks ago,
did something happen?
Confirmed to 9to5Mac that the Mac Pro is no more. They have no plans to offer future Mac Pro hardware.
Yep.
This is the end of the Mac Pro. We didn't get to talk about it, but we definitely should touch on it.
Sure.
The Mac Pro is dead.
Yeah, it's dead. It needed to die. Look, our friend John Siracusa, one of the things I love about him is that he is an idealist.
Yeah.
And he like he had a I mean, it's good. He was saying, he's been saying for a while, like why is this still here? Just kill it, put it out as a misery. It's very much like, you know, I've loved like when my 19-year-old cat was at the end, it was like, this poor guy, it's just time. And it's like that with the Mac Pro. It's like, I love it, but it's got to go. But like John is, it's got like, I mean, right? It's just like nobody, it's sad. And it's like, put it out of its misery. I mean, I'm making jokes, but it's a true thing. Like at the end, I could bear my poor cat, right? Like, and it was like, we got to put him down now because we love him. We got to put him down. The Mac Pro, like John loves it, but he even knew it's like, this is not living. This is terrible for all. But his idealism is like, but Apple could do a more powerful system, and the Mac Studio is not gonna be able to. It's like, could God make an M chip, but in this case, God is Johnny Sruji, so powerful that not even the Mac Studio could cool it? And you know, my thought is, I don't know, the Mac Studio can cool a lot of things, and John's like, no, more powerful than that. And I'm like, okay, John. But the truth is, Mac Studio came out in 2020. Like, if Apple's looking at its chip roadmap and the most powerful chip it wants to make in 5 years or 4 years is outside of the Mac Studio's cooling footprint, what will they do? They'll redesign the Mac Studio so that it does better cooling. That's what they'll do, right? There's not a like, oh no, what will we do? We can't fit it in the Mac Studio anymore. Like, they know what the chips are going to be, and if they need to redesign the Mac Studio cooling for the next 5 generations of chips or whatever, they'll do that. But again, John, being an idealist, is like, but no, even more than that. I'm like, okay, even so much that you need a giant tower to cool it, which is like, I mean, I don't know. So that's true, but I would say that given where Apple is, like, I understand what John's saying, and given where Apple is and what Apple has tried, and they did apparently try to do like a quad chip, and they're like, this is either it didn't work or it didn't make any sense. I think the beauty of Apple's strategy is Apple knows what their chips are going to be like, and they know what their computers are going to be, and that whatever Apple's vision is for what an M8 or 9 Ultra chip looks like, either it will be cooled by the Mac Studio, or they will make a new version of the Mac Studio that can cool it. But I acknowledge that whatever bar they're going to set for that M8, M9 Ultra or whatever, that John would say, why do you not aspire for more? Yes. I get it. I don't think Apple's interested in aspiring for more.
Yeah, I feel like the conversations that we have had on this show in the past about like an M Extreme chip. You know, like if they take essentially 4 chips and stick them together. We were having those at a time many years ago that potentially now would have been when that chip would exist. And I would say maybe we just don't need it. Like right now, does anyone really feel like they need, like really genuinely need 2 to 4 times the performance they're currently getting from the top of the line Apple Silicon chips? Like I'm just not, I just don't think that is a realistic product that has a lot of use.
And also I would say not only does the further up you go, the fewer people there are, and that there maybe were more of them, but a decade plus of neglect of the Mac Pro has driven them all out of the market. But I would also say the flip side is true, which is Apple made a decision. Look, when Apple made the Apple Silicon on Mac decision that came to fruition in 2020, Apple was saying, you know what? We want computers that are low power and are going to enable us to build things ultimately like the MacBook Neo, and we can scale them high enough up for us to get as high as we need to go. And they made that decision. If you are above the high enough we need to go part, Apple basically is saying, look, we decided all of these MacBook Airs and MacBook Neos and Mac Minis and everything else that we've sold in the M series that's possible because of the M series is more important to us than you are. And that sucks to hear. It sucks to hear. But part of this story is I'm not going to deny that there are users of computers who wish that Apple would make more powerful whatever's up there. What I'm saying is Apple's not interested in that market anymore, period. Like they'll go real high. Like make no mistake, the high-end Macs are very powerful. But if you're somebody who's like, yeah, but I need more in this area, I would say, first off, there probably aren't that many of you. And that's one of the reasons why Apple's looking at that. And like that market saved Apple back in the day because they were high margin customers and they desperately needed them. But today, Apple's a mass market company and Apple's much more concerned about selling MacBook Neos than they are selling Mac Pros. That's why the Mac Pro died. And like it is always hard to hear that Apple has decided you are not a customer they're interested in. But is it the right business decision? The right business decision was probably to kill the Mac Pro in 2013 because the Mac Pro used to be the Power Mac. Power Mac was a mid-range system, but every year with G5 and then the Mac Pro, it became more and more a high-end system. And there were fewer and fewer people who could use it where it made sense. And there is a mistake in thinking that a Mac is like a PC. They're not the same anymore. PCs do also. How many people do we know? You have a gaming PC. Federico has a gaming PC. Yeah. So many people who are not John Siracusa have a gaming PC. Like, it's a different device. I have a console. I don't have a gaming PC, but I have a console. I have a PlayStation. I have I have a Switch too, and that doesn't make me a less of a Mac user, right? It's a different product, and Apple has chosen what they've chosen. I think the Mac Pro irrelevance started so long ago because it's just a niche high-end product. And as much as Apple promised, like, no, we do love our high-end users, really, when they said that and they made that new Mac Pro, in the background, they were already building the Mac Studio. And I can guarantee you that they all thought, this is the new Mac Pro. This is what our Mac Pro is going to be. And the Mac Studio is amazing. Like, and if you need more than that, Apple is not going to help you because Apple made their decision. And you can say that it was a deal with the devil if you want to. If you're a very, very high-end user and you're poo-pooing the MacBook Neo and the MacBook Air even as toys because you're a high-end user who needs more, and I would argue most of those people who say they need more, they actually just like having more or want more. They don't actually need more. There are also people who actually need more. That's fair, but I think there's some delusion up there and some ego about like, I want the most powerful system. I think that's part of the dynamic too. But like Apple, in order to get this enormous benefit of Apple Silicon, had to draw a line in terms of what their chips were going to be capable of or what they were willing to make them capable of. Because also the other part of this, sorry for this rant, is I think they looked at that quad, ultra mega chip and said, why are we doing this? Like, who's going to buy this? It's going to cost a fortune. And like, do we want Apple Silicon engineers working on chips that are going to get bought by nobody? We don't. Like, 99% of the people don't want that. And for the 1% who do, I would say, I'm sorry, other computers are available. And I know that's a rough thing to hear, but like at the end of the day, I appreciate the idealism of somebody like John who's like, oh, but they could, and imagine if they did. And it's like, yes, but they taps the spreadsheet. No, they are not. And it's not like they aren't making powerful computers. It's that they're making powerful computers that fit their philosophy and no further.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of had two thoughts on this. Like, one is a continuation of the thing that we've spoken about in the show so many times when considering the Mac Pro, which is that the mistake of the trash can was that it forced them to make another Mac Pro. When clearly Apple had decided they were going to the iMac Pro as the Pro Mac. And then you go Mac Pro to iMac Pro to Mac Studio. That should have been where we are now, but instead we had this Mac Pro just like hanging around for a few more years.
That Mac Pro apology, like I know people think, we all thought of it as a positive because it was Apple sort of like saying we do care about the Mac, but what they were really talking about, like we do care about our traditional from 10 years ago high-end Mac users in these industries that we, that used to be more relevant than maybe our plans are. Like in hindsight though, that Mac Pro roundtable, I'm just going to say it, that was as big a mistake as the butterfly keyboard. It is emblematic of an era where Apple had no idea what they wanted to do with the Mac, or had decided what they wanted to do with the Mac but couldn't tell anybody. But like it was just what a disaster that whole era was. Like I really believe they thought the Mac was just going to go out on a nice flow and be done. And then they decided, no, we're going to bring the Mac up to spec with Apple Silicon in our iPhones and iPads. We're going to realign the OSs at the base level so that we can bring over compatibility layers, which have had varying degrees of success, but have made the OSs more similar. And we're going to recommit to the Mac. And like that recommitment killed the Mac Pro. Like there's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Because the trash can was such a flop, they felt bad, and they felt they needed to do this kind of recommitment ceremony. It was like, we're going to renew our vows. But like, you're right. The iMac Pro was the answer. That was going to be the replacement for the Mac Pro. And then that would get you to Apple Silicon, which was going to have the Mac Studio, which is amazing. So I don't know. It's just
I don't think what
are we
the
doing here?
Roundtable was a mistake. I think in hindsight you can see that it made things more complicated, but it was absolutely needed at the time because people were so down on Apple's strategy.
Okay, it was not a mistake in sending a signal that that Apple was committed to the Mac, but the signal it sent was that Apple was committed to the Mac as a high-end desktop platform, and that was not the right signal. Yeah, that was not the right lesson to take from what was going on. Like the Mac roundtable should have been about what they had done to their laptops, not what they had done to their tower
it
PC.
Gave a shine on everything, though, right? Like,
yeah, I guess
it made us feel better. It's like, they're opening the doors and telling us, because the thing they could tell us were the things that ultimately did not matter, right? Like to like the state of the company. So they were saying, let's tell you about the next iPhone like 6 months in advance, right?
And as Stephen Hackett pointed out in such a brilliant bit of observation, the Intel Mac Pro shipped like months before the Apple Silicon transition. And while John Siracusa would say, well, yeah, but that's a great system. It's like the last great Intel Mac. And I don't dispute that. In many ways, I think that Intel Mac Pro is an all-timer because it is the last and greatest of that kind of Mac. But it's also like the end. I mean, literally the world changed after that, and it became essentially irrelevant after that. So I don't know. I think, okay, pulling back here, I think the real story of the Mac Pro is that we used to live in a world where tower computers were relevant, and three quarters of the Mac's Apple sells are laptops. The mobile chip strategy has worked really well for them, but it's a longer trend even than that, which is I always bought towers. I always bought Power Macs. I bought a Power Mac G4. I bought a power computing clone that was essentially a Power Mac. I had a Power Mac G5. And And in 98, 99, the iMac was a toy. It was underpowered. You would get the blue and white G3 or you'd get the G4. The iMac was a toy. By 2007, 2005, the iMac was no longer a toy. The iMac appealed to people like me who used to buy towers. And I'm just emblematic of that whole transition that over time, what used to be a mainstream computer, because of laptops rising in popularity and power, and because lots of computers had enough power to do computer stuff, that the idea of that Tower Mac it went from being a mainstream computer that we all used as our main thing that we did our jobs on to being esoteric, high-end, and increasingly expensive, by the way. Like, the Power Macs used to be like $2,000. And then suddenly they're $5,000, $6,000, right? Like, it all changed. And that's ultimately that, with all of these detours, all of these weird things that Apple did, that's the real story here, is that computer doesn't need to exist anymore, at least for Apple's purposes, because it's no longer, it was once a mainstream computer and is no longer. And that's just the truth of it.
And the great thing about it, in my opinion, of this time that we're in right now, is it's, for the vast majority of people, I mean, they've moved away from it because they have so many options now. It's not like they get rid of the Mac Pro and they have nothing that's very powerful to help you out. Like, there are so many options now that you could have instead. Even a Mac Mini, like a Pro Mac Mini. That thing's I got a little beast sitting here.
Yeah,
that's
why. Yeah, that's exactly why we just don't live in that world anymore. And Apple's decisions to use Apple Silicon on the Mac are informed by that knowledge. That because the whole premise is our chips that we made to do phones are now so powerful, and then they built scaled up versions, right? The M1 was kind of like a follow-on from their experiments that they had on the iPhone, where they had those, or on the iPad Pro, where they had like experimental, like different versions. Those were clearly like M0 and M-1, right? They were setting the stage for what would be the M1. Like, but all of those decisions they made were made knowing that like they could make chips that covered 99% of the uses of the Mac as a platform. And so they go together, and this is the result. But yes, the moment that they decided to go to Apple Silicon, the Mac Pro was doomed. And it's weird. This is the weird part, right? It's like, why was it still here? And I can only think that they had some customers, there's somebody in their enterprise sales division who's like, oh no, but these guys might need another one for their whatever sound system they're doing or whatever. And it's like, okay. So they had enough on hand that they kept it on the price list until they ran out. And then they're like, let's cut it now. But I do hate, that is one of my least favorite things about modern Apple's behavior, is keeping old products around at their original price point for years after they're irrelevant, because it's embarrassing. And they should either like discount the heck out of those things or just say goodbye. But instead they just silently, I imagine that somebody at 9to5Mac has a set of scripts that just check to see if pages change on apple.com and then go see, and they're like, oh, hey, Mac Pro disappeared. Mac Pro order page disappeared. What's that about? But I'm glad it happened. It needed to happen. I don't know why. Why did we wait so long? Yeah, but here we are.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform that is designed to help you stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just getting started or scaling a business, Squarespace will give you everything you need to claim your domain, showcase your offerings with a professional website, grow your brand, and get paid all in one place. You don't want to build a beautiful website for nobody to ever see it. That's why you want to use Squarespace's set of integrated SEO tools. It will optimize your website to be indexed to meta descriptions, an auto-generated sitemap, and more, so more people can find your site through search engine results. You can also manage your video content really easily with a Squarespace site, so you can upload videos, organize a library, and showcase that content on beautiful video pages. You can even sell access to your video library by adding a paywall to your content. This could be perfect for online courses, tutorials, or premium workshops. I have been using Squarespace for probably 20 years now for various projects, because when I have an idea for something I want to put online, I want to go from the idea that I have to having it available to people as quick as I can. And Squarespace gives me all of the tools and all of the power that I could wish to make a website that looks, feels, and works great. Go and try it out for yourself right now by going to squarespace.com/upgrade and sign up for a free trial. When you're ready to launch, use the offer code UPGRADE. You will save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That is squarespace.com/upgrade, and the offer code UPGRADE. You'll get 10% off your first purchase and show your support for the show. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support of this show and all of Relay. It's Rumor Roundup time, Jason Snell.
Yeah, let's do it. By the way, I have a little tidbit which I'm going to share with you now, which is, I know Mark Gurman's editor, right?
Yeah,
I do. He was at my Jeopardy watch party.
Yeah,
and I'm not gonna. We talked about it a little bit. But the thing that I wanted to say, and I try to do the right thing here, even though we call this Rumor Roundup, I just want to point out again, because my friend, who is Mark Gurman's editor, pointed out to me that Mark doesn't really appreciate when his news reports that are multiple sourced are referred to as rumors, because he's not spreading rumors, he's reporting. He's a reporter who's reporting. So I feel like I just want to make that clear again. Like, I try to do this. Like, rumor has it is, like, it's okay for us to talk about this in general as rumors, but, like, I firmly believe, like, when Mark Gurman says something is going on, it's going on, and he's a journalist who's reporting it. So
sure.
we try Mark Gurman is reporting and all that. I just wanted to say that, just because sometimes I see people, not us, I see people saying, like, oh, those are just rumors, whatever, you can't believe rumors. And it's like, journalistic reports are not just rumors. They are more than that. And if we ever suggest that they are, I just want to say, no, I believe that Mark Gurman is extremely good at his job, and that when he is reporting this stuff, it's because it's true.
Yes, I agree with you, which is why we basically talk about everything that Mark Gurman says, and we don't do that for everybody else. Because when Mark says something, it's as good as true.
Oh, yeah, we look at lots of stuff, and then some of that stuff, it's like, no.
But that would also suggest that Mark is right 100% of the time, which he isn't.
He's
so
not.
That's why you kind of have to call them rumors.
Well, no, again,
sometimes.
I don't think that's rumors.
Because in the blanket term.
Because what happens is, just to be clear, when Mark Gurman's wrong about something, I don't believe it's because he was wrong. I believe it's because either his source was not up to date or things changed. That's part of the danger in reporting about things 2 years out for some stuff, is plans do change, and that doesn't mean that the report was wrong. It means that something happened afterward. So, but in general, I think he's very good.
Right? It's like you get. That's just how it goes sometimes.
It happens.
Nevertheless, we talk about Mark Gurman's reports during Rumor Roundup, and
that's why he's the sheriff.
Exactly. They're not all sheriffs.
No.
Mark is.
Yes.
So we've got a bunch of details for what Mark is expecting to see as part of the 27 release OSs that we'll see at WWDC. And it's essentially all Siri stuff and Apple Intelligence stuff. So luckily, I would say, one of the things that Mark Gurman is now expecting to be the case is that Siri will get its own app in the 27 releases. It won't just be the voice assistant that you press the button to and call and can never, ever find out any conversation you previously had. It will be a more chatbot app-like experience where you can go in, have conversations, go back to previous conversations, and continue them in both text and voice. So this is, I think, much needed. And I think no matter what Apple would have done with iOS 27, I think if they wouldn't have had this, it would have always felt like something was missing.
Yeah, great. This is people know how to use chatbots, text interface. I mean, like they had type to Siri and stuff like that. I think it's a good thing to offer, and having it be like those other apps and have like a history and stuff, I think is also really important. So you can, like, especially if there's going to be some context. One of the things that I found with these chatbots that I didn't realize I would find valuable, but I found valuable is it's not a person, right? It's a stack of contexts. And So having like a chat history is really useful because you have different chats with different contexts. So like if I was asking a question and then a day later I need to ask a follow-up, I can go back to that context and then it knows what we talked about. It doesn't have to like guess. It knows the whole conversation we had that led to that point. And that's a valuable thing. I am still a firm believer that the solution to AI isn't just let everybody type in a window. Like that is not it. That is saying that the Apple II had it right and that everything that's come since that is a waste of time because just typing at a prompt is all you need. And I don't believe that. But it is one of the ways. We still do type at prompts a lot in lots of places. And having a chatbot-like experience in general and having histories that you can look at, which I assume is going to be part of this, like I think that's all to the good. And weird... Isn't it? I mean, also weird culturally that Apple seems to be fighting against it, but seems to have finally relented. I think that's also kind of funny. Like, no, we don't. All right, you can have it. What? All right, fine.
I think I heard, it might have been on the Vergecast that they mentioned this. It was definitely another podcast that I listened to where talking about maybe this is an App Store downloadable app so they can make more improvements to Siri that are decoupled from OS releases, which could be more important in a world of AI features.
I don't know. Most of Siri's in the back end, and they can make those changes whenever they want, I would think. I don't know. Maybe.
But like UI stuff.
I doubt
it.
it.
Like, oh, now they do this, so we should do this, right? Like now Gemini can do X, Y, and Z, so why don't we also do X, Y, Z?
Yeah,
maybe.
I guess. I don't expect it to be that. I expect it to just be because Siri's a system feature. I expect it to be a system app.
There will be an enforcement of a branding and a feature called Ask Siri. So apparently this label or button will be seen throughout the operating systems, prompting you to send content to Siri for assistance. Like you could highlight text and say, like, go and find out more about this for me. Mark says that the current iOS 27 betas include personal context and on-screen awareness, and they're still hoping to ship them this year, but now most likely as a part of iOS 27. So these were the two of the key features shown in 2024. App Intents also apparently remains in development as well. And now 26.5, the beta is out. There is nothing Apple Intelligence in beta 1. So I think at this point it feels pretty safe to say that the first time we will see the reemergence of these features will probably be at WWDC again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When they didn't come in March, it seemed like the writing was on the wall, but I think some people are still holding on to it.
And Mark Gurman, I mean, he said at some point, like, they basically... What was that report? There was a report that the smart home screen had been moved on to the 27 train.
Yeah, we spoke
and it's
about
like,
it
if there was ever a signal that they had just decided we're going to put this in for summer, it was that. And that, I think that's fine. Honestly, I know we talked about this. I don't understand why they were trying to get things in the spring, like, or to get some things in the spring and then ship the rest. Like, just don't. Just try to get it right this time. Try to have a coherent story at WWDC. Don't ship like weird halfway features and then eclipse them 2 months. Like, just don't do it. So I'm glad that they are not apparently doing that.
Apple is apparently considering a redesign of the glowing Siri interface that was introduced in iOS 18, moving the main animation to the dynamic island. I'm going to read from Mark Gurman's report here. Quote, when processing a request, a pill-shaped indicator labeled searching appears alongside a glowing Siri icon. Once results are ready, the interface expands into a larger translucent panel with Apple's liquid glass design. Users can pull the menu down further to begin conversing back and forth. Interesting to do a redesign so quickly, but again, it's like it wasn't right?
I didn't mind that animation, but they should not have put the animation out without features behind it. Also, though, like having it tie to the dynamic island is not a bad idea. Like, I'm a big fan of the dynamic island. I think it's a good idea. I think it's so good that it should just exist everywhere in some form, even if you don't have cutouts on your screen, just because it's having a little thing that pops open, animates open to show you what's going on in basically a background process while you're doing whatever you're doing. I think it was a really good kind of interface breakthrough on their part. Look at me saying something nice about their interface team. And like, yes, go with that. Take that further. And so having Siri stuff be a dynamic island thing that can expand and that you can pull it down and that like, great. Let's do it. Fun idea.
And Siri is also expected to replace Spotlight, so there will be a unified interface which will use personal context as well as everything else you can do in Spotlight. So you can start typing stuff, it's going to find things in your apps and know much more about you. And it made me wonder, Jason, do you think that maybe Tahoe's Spotlight revamp was supposed to include a little bit more? Because it's interesting to do this and then the next year be like, we don't do that anymore. It's now called the Siri bar or something.
Well, I mean, maybe. I think so. Joe Rosensteel back in March of last year wrote this piece for 6 Colors and made the point that I think is a really good point, which is Apple has these 2 different text interfaces that are Siri and Spotlight, and they do not talk. Yes. And Apple expects you to type things in different places and get different results and understand why you're getting it. And Joe's point, I think, ultimately is, what are you doing? Why is there more than one thing to do this? So this is great news, I think, because if I'm opening Spotlight and it's got, like, right now it's like Spotlight is in there, but it's also got like web things that it's doing and other things that it's doing, and like, but it's not Siri because Siri is somewhere else. It's like, no, all the things should be together. And I'm not saying like you have to ask Siri, hey lady, open my app for me, right? It's not like you have to do command space and type, please open this app. Like, you would still have a launcher or pull down on an iPhone or whatever. Like, but they should be integrated, right? Intelligently integrated, so that there aren't like, you have to search for context clues about how to type, because in certain circumstances you're expected to type a sentence, and in other circumstances you can't type a sentence or it'll get confused. Like, it just, Joe's rant about it is great, and he's right. This is a high-level interface kind of thing. Like, there shouldn't be 2 kinds of this in your computers. There should be one kind of place that you say or type things and expect a response, and it should do the right thing.
Mark is also reporting that Apple is developing the ability to have Siri take multiple actions from a single prompt. The example that he gives in his article is you could ask it to check the weather, create a calendar event, and send a message in one prompt, and it will go ahead and do each thing. It is wild to me that this doesn't work right now, right? Like I know it doesn't, but also, man, it feels like it should be able to do this stuff. And so I guess it will be nice to do that, and it will be interesting to see how long it takes me to get used to the fact that I can ask Siri to do that.
Right. No, this is all stuff that makes sense, and I worry that we're heaping so much expectation on Siri that it's not going to be able to make it. But like, this is all of the stuff that we feel like Siri should have been able to do like 5 years ago or longer, and it has not done. And maybe they will get there now with Gemini in the background, and with Apple's models being able to be better at taking the incoming call or incoming requests. And I don't know. I mean, they're setting the bar pretty high here, but honestly, this is how it should be, right? Like you said, why should you not be able to say, do these 2 things?
And then in a separate report, Mark is saying that Apple is preparing to allow other companies to have the AI access to iOS that currently OpenAI is the only one that in America, at least, and other parts of the world. So this is what ChatGPT has now. And they will offer the ability for other providers to become the world knowledge partner for Siri, which is something that is still a part of iOS 27. So, like, even though Siri will be, and Apple Intelligence will be powered by Gemini, there is still an expectation that ChatGPT will remain in the OS as like going out and searching things for you. It'd be fascinating to see in what scenarios that would still appear.
Except in this case, it would be whatever chat provider you want.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not entirely clear whether it will be ChatGPT as the default world knowledge, but the point here is that they have an extension system where you can sign into your favorite chatbot app, and then because of this extension system that already exists, but it's just ChatGPT, you'll be able to say, like, I want to use whatever. Like, I have a Claude subscription. I want you to use Claude. And it'll be like, great, I'll use Claude. So it's essentially allowing AI providers to say, we are capable of providing this information, and users to say, I want to use them. And that's how it should work, right? Like that should be part of it. Is this should be modular. If you're if you're paying for ChatGPT, or if you're paying for Claude or whatever, you should be, I don't know, XAI, Meta AI, whatever, you should be able to say, yeah, I want to use that. That's the one I want. And that makes sense to me.
In his Power On newsletter, Mark said, a cornerstone of Apple's strategy in the upcoming iOS 27 extensions feature, which will let users install third-party AI chatbots beyond ChatGPT and run them inside Siri. This feature will have its own dedicated App Store section, effectively creating an AI App Store. It will be a marketplace of sorts for third-party AI integrations.
Yeah.
This made me wonder if you could maybe have multiple that you're plugging into Siri. So, like, you could have different types of questions that would be fulfilled by different types of apps. Like, for example, I think of one of my favorite apps, Athletic, right? Which is doing interpretations of health data. What if it could present itself as an AI extensions app to the system that if I was to ask about a health thing, maybe Siri could grab information from there? I don't know, but, like, I wonder, why would there need to be part of the App Store for this if it's only going to be, like, 5 apps total that could provide an extension?
Yeah, we don't know, but I think the idea here is that any comer, in any market, by the way. So it allows China to certify companies in the Chinese App Store, and then they appear to people in China. Yeah. Let's the EU say, no, not these, but these, and whatever. Like, I think kicking it to the App Store is kind of interesting in that way. And like I said, my understanding is this is based on, the existing extensions that are used for ChatGPT now. So they're basically saying we're opening this up to anybody who wants to do this. And I would also say, I feel like my gut feeling here is this is not like how we go beyond world knowledge in Siri. It's also essentially how different AI providers can tie into the system in different ways. And essentially it is your preferred AI system. So if you use stock Apple, I think you're getting Siri and then Siri powered by Gemini. But if you want full on Gemini that maybe is doing very different things because it's tuned by Google and has access to things that Apple's implementation doesn't, or you're like, no, I don't want that. I want OpenAI. Or no, I want Claude and Anthropic. Like, you choose. You get to choose, and that all the, like, system features that cascade out to AI will use what you prefer. That's how it should be, right? That is how it should be, is that Apple should be providing a stock experience that's good, which they're not currently, but maybe they will be. And then say, if you want more and have a choice, a preference, you just go to the App Store and get your app that you already have, and it'll already, you already have that app, and it's going to say, would you like to use me as an extension on iOS? And you'll say yes, and then it'll just do it. And that sounds like a really natural workflow, actually.
Yes, definitely. This episode is brought to you by Steam Clock. A lot of mobile apps are mediocre. They're not broken, they're just okay at best. But you notice the difference the moment you use a good app. And Steam Clock software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They're a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they've been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but don't have the in-house team to build something great themselves. Steam Clock works with companies to level up their apps so they can go from it's holding us back to it's pulling its weight. Some of their clients discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way to the App Store is not a viable product strategy. What makes Steam Clock worth calling isn't just that they execute well, it's that they'll help you figure out the right approach and give you an honest read on your situation before committing to anything. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they've helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares as much as you do, Steam Clock is where you start. Visit steamclock.com/upgrade to find out more and get in touch. That's steamclock.com/upgrade. Our thanks to Steam Clock for their support of this show and Relay. So we are still continuing our coverage of Apple at 50. Like, it wasn't just last week. We have things that we're planning to do throughout all of April. And today, I wanted us to kind of share a little bit. And these are definitely some stories we've told before, but I think it's a good time to retell them, and there's some people that won't know them. A little bit about our own origin stories of Apple, kind of like how we found Apple, where we were in our lives, and why finding them at the time that we did kind of carried us through to where we are now, to the point that we care so much about the company and its products that we chose to make it our living, and have, through multiple iterations at this point of work in our lives, continued to come back and talk about this company. Mm-hmm. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I'll go first.
Go for it. I think chronologically it makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. So, I mean, I did write about this a little bit. It's at Macworld, or if you're a Six Colors member, you can just read it at Six Colors. I wrote about this last week because they wanted something about it, and I tried to tie it in with Macworld. They wanted it sort of like, also, their readers know that I've been writing for Macworld forever, and so like tie that in there. But my story starts in Sonora, California, where I grew up, out in the middle of nowhere, one stoplight town, and as a result, we were probably not on the. I mean, we were telling a story last week about being in Silicon Valley and being in Santa Clara. It's like, yeah, really exciting stuff happening there. It was not happening up in the foothills until many years later. But my best friend, in elementary school, was a kid named Crispin Holland, and his dad, Chuck Holland, was an elementary school teacher, and he was into computers. And I don't know Chuck's whole background, but like his classroom was where the first computer in my school appeared. And it was a Commodore PET, so it was a very early, primitive, no graphics computer. And then at home, a year maybe later, Chuck and Crispin had an Apple II Plus. And so I would go over to Crispin's house, and we would just mess around on that. We'd play games. We would type in programs. And we were obsessed with it. And ultimately, the Apple II, there was at least one Apple II in the school. Then there were more. I have fond memories of, there were little hallways in between. California school, we had buildings that you just entered from the outside, but there was like a little hallway. So we had like these rooms, for the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they were these buildings that were just squares with 4 classrooms. And in the middle between the 4 classrooms was a hallway. And the hallway is often where the computer was. And so I just have memories throughout that period, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, of going out in the hallway. Like in 8th grade, we went out in the hallway at recess to play Ultima 3, I think, on a computer instead of going outside. And I think they had to clamp down on us after a while. I don't know what I was doing in 8th grade other than playing video games. This is what I remember. And about then I got an Apple IIe at home. And that was a real sales job on my parents. And they were putting money away for me for college. So they were like, okay, we'll do it, but it's coming out of your college money and you're just going to have to deal with that. And I was like, let's do it. And so like that started me on my way. And I was using that computer throughout high school, for everything. I wrote papers on it. I did all the credits for the movies we made in high school using the graphics on the Apple II. which involved like hooking it up to a VCR and then outputting the graphics files one by one. They were in big with fonts and stuff. I used an app called Fontrix to do that. Ran a computer bulletin board, on my Apple II, like all of that stuff. Like I was super into it to the point where even though I never took a computer class in high school, they did this is only a slightly self-aggrandizing story, but they did there was the first programming contest or something that was going on for high schools. And I don't want to overstate it, but it was a little bit like all the people came out of the computer lab and came to me somewhere and said, Jason, we hear you're good at computers. Join us in this contest. It was like, I apparently was known as somebody who knew about computers, yet did not hang out in the computer lab.
They wanted the cool ringer.
Yeah, well, I wasn't I only knew AppleSoft Basic, so I wasn't, the other people in that competition knew like Pascal, and I was like, well, I'm not out of my element here, but that was a fun, so I was known as a computer person anyway. So, went off to college, so Apple, 6-color rainbow, the whole deal. Absolutely, 100%. Went off to college, and spent my first 2 years there with the Apple II, which is good because it was out of the college money that thing got bought when I was in 8th grade or whatever. And in college, first thing, that was when you got like internet access for the first time in that era, was like, here's a login to a shell prompt on a VAX, VMS, or Unix system. But then you could do email with your friends at other colleges who also had that computer thing, that was pretty funny. And so I started doing that, and I could use my modem to dial into the Unix systems from my Apple II, which was pretty awesome. But the real cataclysmic moment for me was, my sophomore year, not my freshman year, because I felt super intimidated. My sophomore year, I saw that my college newspaper, my campus-wide newspaper, was looking for people to work for them. It turned out they had just converted to Macs from a more traditional paste up kind of thing. They had gone all computer. They were laying out the pages in PageMaker, and a lot of the editors were struggling with it. So I entered this environment as a typist. Literally in those days, man, this really makes me feel old, but I was super cool, but everybody else was super old. People come with their articles that they'd written for the newspaper that they had typed on a typewriter,
right?
Or maybe they'd done it on like a computer and printed it out. But to get it on the Macs, you had to retype it. Somebody could come in with a Mac on a floppy disk, but otherwise you had to retype it into Microsoft Word. So that was my first job, because as is known throughout the podcast sphere, I was always a fast typist. So that was my first job.
Typer, folks.
And very rapidly, what would happen, because I did work on my high school newspaper and stuff, is I started kind of editing the articles as I typed them in, because I was fixing mistakes and stuff. And I'm not sure they appreciated that, the editors there, but their solution was to make me an assistant editor instead. So I went from typist to editor fairly quickly in the news department. And we did have some like Mac SEs in back rooms where you could, like, if you were the writer, you could literally go write your article on the Mac back there and turn your story in that way. And people would do that too. Anyway, so that was my exposure to the Mac for the first time. And I was hooked. Literally by the end of that year, there was a sale of the already discounted Mac SE, because it was about to be replaced by the Mac Classic, and education price back then was really much lower. And then it was lower even still a lot of money. And at that point, the money my parents had saved for me for college was a bank account I had a checkbook for, because I was paying the bills. And I just bought a computer. I just bought a Mac SE. And that was the end of the Apple II. The Apple II went home with me and it never came back. But the Mac SE came home with me and then went back to school for the last 2 years. And that was when I fell in love with the Mac. And, I ran the cables so that we could network our office, so that we could all print to our fancy printer instead of what we had to do before then, which was put things on a floppy disk, walk it over to the one computer that was connected to the printer, and the worst. So yeah, that, and nothing would say my would point my career direction more than the fact that I was both the editor-in-chief of my college newspaper and the person who was installing the file sharing software and running the cables for the network so that we could all have a better computing environment. So I was the IT guy and the editor-in-chief at the same time. And it's like, oh, this guy is going to do journalism and computers, right? I feel like the arrow forward was obvious. I think other people I work with maybe, and the people I went to high school with, when I went to my high school reunion, a lot of them were like, oh yeah, we figured you'd do something in computers. I'm like, really? My 2 years of radio and 3 years of newspaper and 3 years of video production didn't tell you that maybe I'd be in the media? And they're like, oh, did you do that? And like, okay, everybody has their own vision of themselves and it doesn't always come into contact with reality. So anyway, yeah. So I went to grad school, and because the job market was terrible, and my friend Randy had gotten a job for like $16,000 a year as a journalist, I was like, oh God, no, let's find a better job. And I did, because I met Pam Piffner, who was a senior editor at Mac User, and that was that moment of like, oh, I could do the magazines that I'm reading, and it would be both media and about the subject area that I cared so much about, and that is literally it, because I became an intern, and then that went well because they offered me a job. And so I started a job there when I was still finishing up my master's degree. And that takes me all the way to when they merged MacUser and Macworld, and they said, we would like you to move over to Macworld. And that takes me all the way to 2014 when I left Macworld, which is why every time we give my daughter advice about applying for a job, my wife points out that I applied for a job one time, which is true. Although I will say I have hired a lot of people. I've seen job applications from the other side a lot, but I only ever really, basically I think I technically had to apply for the job after I was an intern, but like it was my job. It was made for me. So I basically got to talk my way into being a summer intern and then never left forever until 2014 when I left. So that's my story. So basically fell in love with Apple II and then the Mac, and then found a way to make it part of what I did, and found a way to make a job out of that, and found a way to make a career out of that. And that, takes me to now. So that's my story.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. It's been a long day and then hunger strikes. There might be something healthy in your fridge that you could be making, but you want a good meal and you want it fast. Eating healthily isn't always a willpower problem, it's a setup problem, which is exactly what Factor helps with. With Factor, you can hit your nutrition goals this season without the planning, grocery runs, or cooking. Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that's weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, or GLP-1 support. And for strength and workout recovery, you can check out Factor's Muscle Pro collection. Factor meals are fresh, never frozen. There are over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so there's always something new to look forward to. All ready in just 2 minutes. Factor shops, preps, and cooks and delivers straight to your door, so you have more time for everything that you love this spring or anytime. Factor is amazing. I know that Jason can attest to this. You have, I think, multiple members of your family are eating Factor meals.
Yeah.
On a very, I wouldn't say daily, but maybe daily occasion.
No, we're using it to supplement my mom's food because she has trouble cooking for herself, and she's got, she's in her 80s. She's got lots of different ways to eat, some of which are less appetizing than others, but like adding the Factor meals in so that she can just slide those in the microwave and a few minutes later have a pretty complete meal is a huge win. And I think that's part of the endorsement that I have of this, is that, I'm spending my own money to feed my mother Factor meals because of all the different things that I've tried. Like she asked me about a meal box that we get. And I said, she's like, oh, what's that? And I said, oh, it's the thing where you get all the ingredients and then you have to stand in your kitchen and cook. And she's like, no, I don't want that. I was like, yes, that's why you get the Factor meals. Yes. But yeah, they're very good quality, and that's why I pay for my mom to get them.
Head to factormeals.com/upgrade50off and use the code upgrade50off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until September 27th, 2026. See website for more details. That's factormeals.com/upgrade50off and use the code upgrade50off. Our thanks to Factor for the support of this show and all of Relay. So my story is different than your story.
Of course.
And I think is a different story, I think, maybe even to like a lot of people in our world. So I had experience with different Apple computers as a kid. My problem is I don't remember exactly what they were. My uncle was and is a technologically minded person. He is the person that I really have to owe my love of technology. He always had the latest gadgets. I remember it was a big hubbub when he got like a CD player that was an MP3 player, right, where you could like load all your CDs onto it and it would take them as MP3s and you could just choose from your like that was like a big deal in my life when he got that. It was an incredible thing to see. But he had access through his job. He used to work for BT, British Telecom, so like the was at a time and kind of still is like our main kind of telecoms provider in the UK for like especially for like landline calls and stuff like that. But also like then he worked in mobile phone stuff. I remember he had that like Sony Ericsson like Palm Pilot-y kind of thing. That was an incredible thing in my life to see him use this kind of stuff. He once actually gave me this thing that BT was trialing that did not work out. It was a wristwatch that was a pager. That was very fun. But anyway, he had various Apple computers. I believe he had an Apple II of some flavor that I played around with, and I especially remember a PGA Tour golf game that I poured many hours into whenever I'd visit him, but I didn't really care about golf, but it was a game he had because he loved golf, and so that was the video game that I played. And I know that he had various PowerBook laptops over time as well. And some of this stuff would get handed down to me. The first time I ever saw a sad Mac face was when, the internet didn't exist for me at the time, so I would just dig through the file directories on this computer, and I assume I deleted something really important. And I also remember at one point seeing a floppy disk with a question mark on it. I don't know what I did to these computers, but they were hand-me-downs, and I learned a love of computing by just digging around on this stuff. But so this was like a thing, and then we got a PC at home, and then we got the internet, and I didn't think about it for many years until the iPod became a thing. And so I was really intrigued about the iPod Mini. So I think this is 2004? And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the advertising that got to me, but it was like, I want one of these. I actually had a mini disc player before then, which I loved, but then an MP3 player sounded even better. Yeah,
cool mini disc.
Man,
wow,
I loved my
the
Sony
90s.
mini disc player. It was so great. It was the blue one, like the classic blue one. Oh man, I loved that thing. But then I was like, no, I don't want the discs anymore. I want an MP3 player, and the only MP3 player that I want is an iPod. And the iPod Mini was very exciting to me. And I remember I went to an electronics store, and the only one they had was the pink one, which wasn't necessarily what I wanted. I wanted the green one. But I wanted it so bad, I was like, I'm just going to get the pink one. And I'm actually really happy I had the pink one, because the pink iPod Mini was awesome. And then over time, I had all the accessories. I had the belt clip, which is actually, the belt clip was actually pretty cool. I loved my iPod Mini. And this then got me in. I was in. With the iPod Mini, I was like, this, I was plugging it into a PC at the time, but this was what I wanted. And every week, I would be on the iTunes Music Store, seeing what new music there was, and then I'll buy new albums. And I discovered so much music during this time just because I had the iPod Mini. But it also threw me into the world of like iPod rumors, and then just general Apple, and then like it expanded my love of what was possible in computing because I came through from the iPod. So websites like obviously Macworld, but iLounge was a big one. the unofficial Apple weblog. Like, these were sites that I would start frequenting to read about rumors and things like that. This then ended up, through different, I would then start looking at more iPods, and then another big one for me was the video iPod. So, what's that, maybe 4th gen was the first iPod with video. I remember something that this is very funny for me at the time. I guess I was maybe like 16 or 17 when this came out. And I convinced my mum that she had to let me, this was a Christmas gift. And I convinced her that I needed to have it for a few days. This was my only Christmas gift that year, so I could set it up. Because I said to her, like, it's useless to me as a gift as there's nothing on it.
Right.
Which meant that I then spent a few days just playing with and watching, I think, episodes of Family Guy under the covers at night, and anything else I could find. And actually, the video iPod is what led me to discover podcasts.
Ah.
Because there was a burgeoning field of video podcasts at the time, and that was like Dig Nation was the first one that I watched, and then other stuff from Revision 3. It's how I found Twit, and then how I found MacBreak. It was all through wanting to watch video podcasts on my iPod. This all leads to 2006. So January 2006 was my 18th birthday, and through a combination of my birthday money that was coming and the part-time job I had at the time, I decided I was buying my first Mac. And the expectation was that there would be a new iMac announced at Macworld in 2006. And that I decided this was the one I was going to get. That just so happened to be the first Intel Mac. That is what I ended up buying. So my first Mac of my own was the first Intel iMac, the white kind of plasticky bulbous one. That was my first Mac, and I remember, like, I just fell in love with this computer. I loved it so much, and would show all of my friends. And we loved Photo Booth. Everybody loved Photo Booth. Like, that was like such a big deal at the time. And I did, everything I could possibly do. Right? I built websites with iWeb. I was just in it, spending all my days on this computer. And then I fell in love with Apple at that point. Later on down the line, I got a white MacBook. I bought my white MacBook using my first paycheck, my entire first paycheck from my full-time job in banking. I remember I was at a training course, and I went to the ATM to check that it had been deposited. It was. I was on my way home from the training course. I stopped off at the Apple store, and I spent every penny on a white MacBook. So now I had 2 Macs, right? I had my laptop, and I had my desktop. And then, like, this is, I don't remember what year this is, but like, we're in it now. And then I'm into the iPod Touch and the iPhone. And, like, when I was reflecting on this today, that 2004 to, say, 2008 run, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who
legendary
would not have been me at that moment and then not just be completely devoted to Apple for the rest of their lives?
Yep.
Like, if you start in 2004 and then you end up with an iPod mini, a video iPod, an iMac, a MacBook, an iPod Touch, and an iPhone, all in like a 4 to 5 year span, like, unbelievable. Like, just like a legendary run for a company. Yeah. Like, I couldn't
and then the iPhone
believe
came
it when
out.
I was looking at this today. Yeah, and then it was like, now we're off.
Boom.
Just unbelievable. And then in 2010, I decided I needed to start a podcast of my own. And this was in between the iPad being announced and being released. So I started podcasting in April of 2010. The iPad was released here in July. Like, it was there was both the iPhone, the first iPhone, and the first iPad. They came internationally a little bit later, and I remember just like the first few episodes of my first ever podcast was just me just being increasingly frustrated about having to wait, because Apple was a much smaller company at this time. They didn't even acknowledge that it would ship internationally, like, let alone talk about when that might be. It was like, we're going to be shipping in April. It's like, yeah, but only in one place. And then they eventually announced it. And then, yeah. So this, like, when I was spending time looking back at this over the last couple of days, and I kind of think to myself, well, of course I'm doing what I'm doing. You know, like, I can't see a scenario where I could care about anything more. You know, like, this span of 5 years, it gave me kind of everything I could ever imagine. And I was still so young, you know, like I was a late teen into early 20s with this stuff. And so it was just so formative to me. And it was also so cool at the time. Like, I think that's the thing that is, maybe if you're younger, is hard to explain how cool Apple was in the 2000s. Like, because they were small, but their products were so amazing, and everybody wanted them, whether they had them or not. It wasn't like a given that you would have one. Everyone wanted one. Everyone wanted an iPod, especially the iPod Mini. Everybody wanted the MacBook, right? The plastic MacBooks, either the white one or the black one. You know, everybody wanted one of those computers. Then everybody wanted an iPhone, and it was such an incredible time. And I feel so lucky that this is kind of my story with them.
Yeah. I would maybe even argue that you and I are representative of the two great influxes of people who started getting into Apple stuff. Is that I was part of that group of kids who were exposed in the Apple II generation and then just kind of went off. And I guess there's also the other group would be, bring it back to John Syracuse, I feel like the people who just saw the original Mac and were blown away, but I was primed to see the Mac and get it by my time with an Apple II. And then the second wave is the iPod, iPod to iPhone, that early 2000s. Yeah.
I don't think many people were getting that into it in the intervening time, right? Like it wasn't the right time.
It was probably not the coolest time to be an Apple fan of 1990.
But it does
when
feel
I started
like,
my job,
like if it wasn't your time, it was my time, right? Like these were the times that created the enthusiasts, the fanboys, whatever you would call them.
Yeah.
Like this was the time in which these things were happening, because they were doing such unbelievable things. You know, like the thing, like the iPhone was just so incredible. I don't remember if I mentioned this on the show last week, but in preparation for my incredible impression of an impression of an impression, I watched some of the iPhone keynote, like the Steve Jobs iPhone keynote.
Yeah.
One, it's the greatest product demonstration ever, and there'll never be a better one. But two, just like the way in which people were reacting to the things that were happening, I've never heard before. That like people were shocked to see scrolling. Like that was on its like, whoa, what's he doing?
Right.
Like, and just the unlocking of the phone was eliciting gasps.
Yeah.
You were there, right?
I was there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I know you obviously touched one afterwards, but you were obviously in the room when it was happening.
I remember the moment that I got what he was doing with the, it's a breakthrough internet communicator. It's an iPod that plays video. It's a phone. And then I remember it spinning around again for him to repeat it. And I was like, oh, I see what the bit is here.
Yeah.
And I felt like it took a couple more for the audience to start going, and him saying, are you getting it? But that's a masterful, legendary. It's possible that you could argue that there are other Steve Jobs keynotes that are more impressive in terms of the showmanship, but the combination of the showmanship and the product that's being shown, you put those together and you can't match that one, I think. And I say that as somebody who just scrubbed through the entirety of the iPod launch video, which is a very different vibe.
Like there's like a moment in it very early on, like when he's just he's basically just shown the whole thing and he's like, and here it is, and he takes it out of his pocket and he puts it away again, and it's like, oh, that's such a flex. It's like, I'm not showing it to you yet. I've got it. It's in my hands, but not for you. It's like, wow.
Wait for it.
It's just it's so good. So yeah, that is my origin story.
Very nice.
Let's knock out one Ask Upgrade question because we don't really have time. But I feel bad when we
single laser.
When we don't do them. One single laser, and this question is going to come from Logan. Logan says, with Apple introducing the MacBook Neo and discontinuing the Mac Pro, could there be a new naming scheme in the works? Neo, Air, Studio, and Ultra becoming the tags, while Pro and Pro Max are retired or just used for chips. Could the MacBook Pro become the MacBook Studio or the MacBook Ultra? Could other products be named the same way, or is this all just marketing jargon that never made sense in the first place?
I'm sorry to do this to you, Logan, but the answer is just no. Pro doesn't mean what you think it means. Pro being used in the Mac Pro is the worst example of using Pro in Apple's product lines. I'm sure they're relieved that it's not there anymore. I will also say that the Mac Studio, it could have been called the Mac Pro in a different world, but Studio is a pretty good name too, so that's fine. I think that's a nice way to do it. But they're not going to change the name of the iPhone 17 Pro, the Pro Max. No, they're not going to do any of that. Pro means nice, except for the Mac Pro, which is now gone. So it makes Apple's use of Pro better and more consistent now. So no, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, there are people that, I've seen rumors about this, that or people suggesting that the touchscreen MacBook Pro will be called the MacBook Ultra, and I just don't think that's going to be the case at all. That's going to be the MacBook Pro.
I don't see it. I don't see it. I think it's going to be the high-end models of the MacBook Pro. Yeah. And then they'll still keep the M6 around in the base model that is not redesigned. I think that's what's going to happen there, so that they can sell it at a low price. Yeah, this is overthinking it, and yes. Nobody thinks of Apple products with a Pro label and thinks about the Mac Pro, because nobody thinks about the Mac Pro. So no, sorry. I don't know why Myke picked this question just for me to kick it, but there it is. That's the one question we've got.
Jason, we have had so many questions about product naming. We had to do it. We had to do one of them so people will stop asking.
Don't look at the discontinuation of the Mac Pro as literally meaning anything about anything other than the Mac Pro.
It all started with the Neo. So, the Neo started a tidal wave of product naming questions. That,
oh boy!
I wanted to just answer one of them so we could get it out there. And I like Logan's because Logan admits it at the end. It's all just marketing jargon that never made sense.
That's right. Anyway. Don't try to apply a lot. There is logic to Apple's product names, but it's not the logic you're thinking of.
If you would like to send us in a question for us to answer in a future show, or you have any feedback or follow-up, go to upgradefeedback.com. I'd like to thank our members who support us with Upgrade Plus. Go to getupgradeplus.com and you'll get longer ad-free versions of the show every week. You can find us on YouTube by searching for Upgrade Podcast. I would like to thank our sponsors of this week's episode one more time. That is Delete Me, Squarespace, Steam Clock, and Factor. But most of all, I would like to thank you for listening. Until next time, say goodbye, Jason Snell.
Goodbye, Myke.